Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Happy So What Day. I'm so glad that you are all joining us here because I have a really fun project that we're going to go through, and you will learn some techniques along the way. So if you are new to So What, give me a thumbs up so I can give you a shout out. And if you are a So What veteran, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about a great gift idea you can make for Father's Day, and it also makes a great gift for graduation. So if you are going to graduation parties right now, which thankfully I'm seeing some small gatherings start to happen out there, so that's really great for our grads, unlike last year when everything had to be virtual. So at any rate, this is a great project if you have a grad who maybe is headed off to business school or some sort of job where they might be wearing a tie. And I'm going to be giving you some other ideas that you can use to, or that you can create using the pattern that I will be showcasing today. So not just for Father's Day, really not just for grads either, but it works for so many different things. Okay, before we get into that, we have a great sale going on right now at Sulky.com. There are a number of items that are 40% off. So this is our 10/40 easy play on tax day sale, and you will find a lot of our webinar kits we have brought back and are offering those at 40% off. So you can check out all of those legacy webinars, we call them, our webinars that have happened in the past at sewingonline.sulky.com. That's where all of our webinars, videocasts, webcasts, all of our education is housed at sewingonline.sulky.com. So if you find one of these great webinar kits and you want to grab it, be sure to go and also register for the webinar. You will get all of the information from the designer, from the guest that we hosted for the webinar, and you'll be able to watch the entire thing on demand at any time. Our legacy webinars are free events, so you don't have to pay anything to attend. And it's a great accompaniment to those kits so that you can get tips from the designer, additional techniques, and maybe even some great freebies thrown in as well. So check out all of those kits that are on sale. There's also some thread packs and some slim lines at a great, great price. So Sulky.com is where you find all of our products. And then if you want to engage with our education or sign up for those webinars, that is our education site, which is sewingonline.sulky.com. So there's a lot of confusion between the two, rightfully so, but we just have to have a separate site for all of our education so that we can bring you live streams and all kinds of additional functionality. So that's really the reason for two sites. All right, so a number of you coming in and saying hello. I appreciate that so much. For everyone who is engaging with the post today, liking the Sulky Facebook page, sharing out the post, we have a great giveaway today. And it is a product that you will want to use with the pattern that I'm going to be showcasing. So our giveaway today is a pack of Sulky paper Solvey. If you've never tried paper Solvey, you're going to want to after today's So What, because I will be using this to paper piece the pattern that I will be showcasing. We're doing foundation paper piecing, and it is made so much easier with the help of Sulky paper Solvey. This is a water-soluble paper. I know. You can print on it on your home printer and then use it as the foundation for building your quilt blocks, and then it washes away entirely. So if you've ever done foundation paper piecing in the past, you know the frustration of having to pick out all of those little pieces of paper once your piecing is complete. Sometimes you can give it a little bit too much of a tug and your seam pops out and you have to re-sew it. So it can be really frustrating to use regular paper for foundation paper piecing. So Paper Solvey solves all of those problems because in those little areas you can leave the stabilizer intact and then simply just wash it away once your entire quilt is complete. It also provides additional stability when you're quilting the quilt, so you can leave it in places where maybe you have a bunch of bias cut edges, because as you know, when you are foundation paper piecing, your fabric can go any which way on angles and all sorts of things, and so it will provide stability while you are constructing the quilt as well. So that is Sulky Paper Solvey. Again, that is today's giveaway. So give me all those emojis, the thumbs up, the likes, the shares, and you are automatically eligible to win today's gift. All right, so let me go over the project. I'm also going to try to sew a little bit for you as well, so you can see the product in action along with some other things. Before I show off the Father's Day gift idea, I wanted to also discuss some other great gift ideas for maybe some grads in your life who, might be going off on their own for the first time. I personally think it is a great idea to gift someone a sewing kit. Whether they have a sewing machine or not, a sewing kit is really just something that you would send someone off to the dorms, to their first apartment, something like that, so that they have some things on hand should they need to sew on a button or repair a pair of pants or even embellish something and, kind of learn the art of hand embroidery. So I put together a couple of different sewing kits using products that I found at sulky.com. Some of these are new items that you can add to cart along with your thread purchase. If you're grabbing up something for the 40% off sale, add these as well. They're relatively inexpensive, and you can gather some things maybe you also have in your stash to round out the gift. So, first of all, we have a really cute beginner quilting kit, and really it's for beginners to intermediate to advanced. Anyone who likes to quilt or wants to learn how to make a quilt would love this beginner quilting kit. First off, it comes with this cute little pouch. This little pouch can hold a rotary cutter, which we now have these at sulky.com. So it's the perfect size to fit a rotary cutter and a couple of spools of thread, a pack of needles, maybe even a small pair of snips. But in the kit, along with this pouch, you also get a can of Sulky KK2000, which we all know is great for so many things, not just quilting, but really great for spray basting your quilt layers together. This also fits in this little pouch. I will say though, if you are storing the KK in this pouch, not many things are going to fit on the other side. You could fit a ruler and some organ needles and maybe 2 spools of thread. So just keep that in mind. If you're using it for the KK to store it and take it to a class or something like that, you're going to need to finagle some things to fit anything else in the pouch itself. But like I said, your rotary cutter also can slip inside this little elastic side of the carrier. So with the pouch, you get the KK. You also get a 6-pack of neutral Sulky 50 weight cotton thread. This is the thread that I like to use sort of as my all-purpose go-to construction thread. I also like to do piecing with it. I'll be using it today for the paper piecing project because it's nice and lightweight and creates really crisp, beautiful seams. You can also use it for your quilting on top of the quilt. It is a long staple, high quality thread. No lint is produced by this thread. It's really, really good stuff. So The 6-pack of neutrals is great for a sewing kit. We also sell this as a separate product. If you want to create or curate your own sewing kit, grab up the 6-pack of neutrals and then bring in some other items to sort of, round out the gift. Anyways, the KK, the 6-pack of thread, the Eco Pack of organ quilting needles. You will also get this really great quilting ruler. Now, I use this for so many things, not just quilts, but I will be using it today as well. And I used it for this project because it is the perfect little size to measure your seam allowances while you're working your way through a foundation paper piece block. But I have about 4 of these rulers. I keep one near my ironing board, I keep one near my sewing machine, and I keep one at my cutting table, and then there's always one floating around somewhere else. So I happen to love this ruler. It's a 1x6, really great for so many different applications. So if you would like, you could just buy up the beginner quilting kit, and then you'll have a sewing kit that you can gift to a graduate, and they'll be ready for their first quilt to create something, but also have some other tools to do some mending if they need to, or make their own curtains, something like that, because they're gonna want to personalize their new space that they get to call home. So that's one idea. Another idea is to grab up one of our cute little zipper jute bags and embroider something on it. I did a tutorial for embroidering these a couple of weeks ago on So What. I did it for some teacher gifts. And so you can put this on your hoop and embroider a cute little saying on it for the grad, or a monogram or something like that, and then fill it up with sewing supplies to create your own little sewing kit. You can grab up one of the Rotary cutters. I've got my favorite pair of little snips, which are good for handwork or sewing on the go. I also have some hand needles for the mending and embroidery and embellishment. I have a pack of flower head pins, which are really cute. I have a little marking pen. These are all available at sulky.com. So you can just kind of pick and choose the things that you want to include in your sewing kit gift. This is a friction pen, so it is heat removable and erasable. Love that. And then, of course, don't forget some beautiful spools of Sulky thread. This is an assortment of different types and weights of thread. So there's some for embellishing. There's 12-weight cotton petites, 40-weight poly deco, the 50-weight cotton. So just kind of mix and match so that your gift recipient has a bunch of different options to choose from based on the project or based on the need. So that's another great gift idea. And of course, you can personalize it, which we all love to do. All right, so let's get to the project. Some people are saying, I just wanted to make sure I was addressing any questions, but everyone's saying hello. So hello. All right. So here is the project that I'll be talking about. I linked to the full tutorial in the description of today's post. So don't be concerned with measurements or supply lists, things like that. You can grab it all at the link. It is one of our free projects available at sulky.com, so you'll be able to find it easily. So it is essentially this quilt. This is a little mini quilt / wall hanging, something for your door. What I'm going to show you how to do is how to piece together the little tie portion of the quilt. You can use that little tie block and create a long table runner to celebrate Father's Day. You can make a larger quilt with lots more blocks. You could create one with a little message on it and create a card out of it for your graduate, things like that. So this is the quilt without machine embroidery. And once I hung it up and looked at it, I thought, this is really missing something. It needs a message. It needs personalization. So I actually added my machine embroidery after the fact, and then I added it into the tutorial, sort of the proper way of doing it, which would be to embroider it before you do the quilting. Now, since I did mine after the fact, I honestly just embroidered a little rectangle of that gray fabric along the top, and then I appliqued it onto the quilt. And you can use Sulky invisible thread to applicate it onto the quilt, or you can just choose a thread that matches the gray. This is the 50 weight cotton. So what I did was I created a little saying, just using the built-in fonts on my embroidery machine. And the sizing for this and the recommended spacing for the font is all in the tutorial. So I did Dad since 2011, and I actually meant for it to be a little bit askew, so it was kind of like kid writing. All right, so I also thought it would be fun to do something like an awesome dad lives here, and then you could put that on your front door for Father's Day. Or another great idea is to make this a memory quilt for someone who has passed. Maybe your grandfather or a special dad in your life. And I hear from a lot of people that they inherit their dad's ties or their grandfather's ties, or they have held on to these because they remind them of someone who has passed. Well, what a great idea to use those actual ties for the fabric that goes in the tie portion for each block. Then you can create a large memory quilt, which can be displayed or simply just used and cuddled with. And it's a great way to honor someone who has passed. You can put their name and maybe their birth and death dates on the quilt as well. And what a great, great keepsake that would be. So if you want to use existing ties for the tie portion of the piecing, you will want to make sure first they are laundered according to the recommended, according to the tag of the tie. If you have a silk tie, something fancy like that, you probably don't want to use it for this, just because it will need to be taken care of differently from the rest of the fabric on your quilt. And you won't be able to use the paper Solvey because the silk tie is not going to take well to rinsing that product away. So be mindful of the care content of the ties that you're choosing. Also, after laundering or dry cleaning, you'll want to remove any interfacing, take the tie apart, remove any interfacing, press everything nice and flat so that it's ready to go, just like you would prepare your fabric for the piecing portion of the tie. But I think that's just a really cool way to incorporate maybe some ties you've inherited. You could also head to the thrift store, grab up some really inexpensive ties, use that fabric for the piecing and maybe even for the borders, and it could be a really cool piece of art. So this is what we will be making. I'll show you a little overview of the proper way to do the embroidery. You could certainly just patch it on there like I did, and then you can change the message out simply by removing your applique stitches. So that's another idea as well. Repurpose it. Put a new message on there if you so desire. So the foundation paper pieced tie pattern is part of the free project PDF that you will download and print. So when you get your paper Solvey, be sure you've only selected the tie pattern to print on your paper Solvey, not the rest of the PDF. So just tell your printer only print this page. Make sure you put your paper Solvey into your printer. You can set it to the draft setting. You really don't need to saturate this product with a bunch of ink. You just need to be able to see the lines that you'll be following with your stitching. So all the solid lines are your stitching lines, and any dotted lines are your cutting lines. So you can see the dotted lines are just on the outside portions of these two blocks that we will be piecing and then joining together. All right, so all these solid lines are your sewing lines. So you need to take into account your seam allowances beyond those sewing lines. So when you are choosing fabrics for this, you want to sort of audition them behind the paper, right side up, so that you can see that everything is going to fit, including seam allowances. So if you want to subcut your fabric pieces while you're working or before you're working, be sure to audition them before subcutting them so that you don't cut away too much for that particular piece. You can also see there are two colors on this pattern. There's kind of a grayish color and then the white color. That denotes the two different fabrics you're going to use for piecing this together. The gray fabric is actually a light blue if you're looking at it on your computer screen. And if you want to print this in color, you certainly may, but I was saving printer ink and I just printed it grayscale. If you have a paper piecing pattern that has more than two fabrics, there might be different color shades or different shades of gray, and it might be harder to see which fabric goes where if you're printing in grayscale. So just keep that in mind. This is a really easy one, so we can print it in grayscale and it just gives us the two different fabrics. So sometimes I will also mark or write down sort of a code for the fabric print I'm using if the pattern calls for different prints. Okay, more than just two. All right, so first things first, you're going to cut apart your pattern pieces in order to use them. You can see I have just cut them out along that dotted line. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now so that I gotta find my paper scissors. Even though it's paper Solvey and it's a very thin paper, I mean, you can pretty much see through it. This is the back side of the paper. I'm still going to use my dedicated paper scissors rather than my fabric scissors for this. Pretty particular about my fabric scissors. I'm sure many of you are as well. So you may not want to cut in the air like I am, but I have so much stuff in front of me that is why I am doing it this way. You can also give yourself more of a margin around that dotted line if you find it easier to work with a little bit larger piece of paper. So I now have my top portion of the block all cut out. And I'm going to begin the piecing process. Oh, I just have a photo of some cute fabrics that I found. Now, you can choose one fabric for all of your ties, one fabric for all of the outer area, the border of your ties, or you can do like I did and choose a plethora. Which photo is it? So I did two fabrics for two ties, two fabrics for the other two ties, and then I kind of mixed and matched to make my borders and my binding. And I grabbed a few fat quarters for this. That's how small this project is. So depending on how many blocks you want to create, you'll have to obviously grab more fabric. All right. So now begins the piecing process, and I'm going to get my other camera going here, and hopefully you all can see it well. Okay, so another helpful thing is next to my sewing, when I'm doing foundation paper piecing, I have a pressing station. I also, over here out of frame, have a cutting station with my rotary cutter and my protective mat. You don't want to put your protective mat underneath your ironing surface, even if it's a heavy-duty wool pressing mat like this is. We also carry these wool pressing mats at Sulky.com. They make for a great portable pressing station. Super awesome. You don't want to put your cutting mat underneath this to save space, because the heat can transfer through if you are really giving it some hot steam, and you will warp your cutting mat. So make sure that your pressing area is different from your cutting area. Also, super handy and now available at Sulky.com is a mini iron that you can use for foundation paper piecing like this, or for your separate pressing station that you create next to your machine. I absolutely love it. It comes in this great violet color, as well as a light yellow. There's a pink, and then there's also a teal color that's really cute. So I know you're all going to want one of these once you see it, because super nice. It gets rather hot. It also will steam very well. So right now I have it on the dry setting, and it's on its little protective resting silicone deal. So I've got my station all set up, and here is my pattern that I'm going to start with. So there are letters and numbers, and that is the order that you're going to sew. So this is A, and I have A1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I'm going to choose my first fabric. I'm going to go with, you can see I have this pile of scraps here. Foundation paper piecing is so great for fabric scraps. So if you are one who doesn't throw away those scraps, then you might want to try your hand at foundation paper piecing so that you can use up some of that stuff. All right, so I am auditioning fabric. If you're using a directional print, make sure that everything is going to go the same way when you're doing your piecing. That one is not big enough, because as you can see, it's covering that whole piece, but I don't have enough for a 1/4 inch seam allowance above or below that piece. So it's not big enough. It's not going to work. All right, so I am going to go with this larger piece, and since I can see through this paper, I can actually see the fabric print underneath, and I can make sure that I have plenty of seam allowance to piece this guy. I'm going to subcut it a little beyond my seam allowance over here, just to make it more manageable while I'm piecing things together. So A1. Now, if you think about it, we're actually sewing kind of backwards. We're sewing from the wrong side of the piece. So you want to actually turn the piece wrong side facing up, put your paper over the top, and then with right sides facing, we're going to place the second fabric piece and audition that one to make sure it's big enough for that area. So now I have my little light gray piece. I'm just going to use that for the background of my tie. And with right sides facing, since A2 is rather small, I know this is going to be big enough. I'm going to put these right sides together. Now, when folded over so that right sides are out, I can see I will have more than enough gray fabric for my seam allowance and for my A2 piece. Now you could see I have extra fabric hanging over my seam allowance. I'm going to trim that after I sew it. So right now I have right sides facing and my paper is on top. I'm going to sew along the line that is between A1 and A2. And I'm going to secure my threads on either side of that line. Now, if you happen to have a laser light function on your machine, That will help you sew right across that line perfectly accurately. So what I do is I first sink my needle right into that joining line. And I am going to shorten my stitch length just slightly. I'm just going to go to 2.0. Now, some paper piecers and paper piecing patterns will tell you to go down to about 1.5. The reason for that is because they want the paper that you're using to actually get slightly perforated while you're working through the project. That way, you can kind of just tear away your paper a little bit easier. But I hate using a seam allowance that's that tight, because if I make a mistake, and the chances are pretty great that I'm going to make a mistake or use a piece of fabric that's not large enough for the area, something's going to need to get ripped out at some point. Ripping out stitches that are 1.5 is, let's just say, not fun. Okay, so I'm going to go down to 2.0. I'm using really lightweight paper Solvey. If I go to 1.5, it's actually going to perforate this so much that my foundation paper might actually start falling apart. It's just, it is what it is. So here we go. We're going to start sewing. I keep hitting the camera. I apologize. And I'm going to cut my threads. You can go a little bit beyond your joining line. So now I have that first seam is sewn. I can move my fabric so right sides are facing out, and there's my first seam for my tie. But I have to trim away this extra fabric so that it doesn't get caught in the rest of the pattern. So what I do is fold back the pattern along that seam line, and then I take my little 1x6 ruler, and you're going to go to your rotary cutter and trim that 1/4 inch seam allowance. So sorry, my cutting station is out of frame. So I will show you what that looks like after I slice it with my rotary cutter. So foundation paper piecing is really a process of sewing, trimming, pressing, sewing, trimming, pressing, and you just follow the numbers with your fabrics. So now I have trimmed my seam allowance. I can trim up my little thread tails a little bit too. Make sure I'm not going to get caught in my next seam. And now we're going to give it a press. Some people say, can you press that paper, Solvey? Can you give it some steam? Now here's the thing. You actually can give it some steam. Just a little shot of steam is all you need. You do not want to saturate this with a bunch of steamy, hot, watery steam because the paper Solvey will start to dissolve. But a little shot of steam is fine. All right, so now we've got A1 and A2. I have lots of extra fabric beyond A2 and my join of A2 and A3. So I can go ahead and fold along that line, the next line that I'm going to sew, and trim that seam allowance. And really, that's just to make things more manageable as I'm going along. So now I have that additional 1/4 inch seam, and I'm going to audition my piece for A3. So I'm going to take that same gray fabric that I was using before, because I'm certain I can get a piece large enough for that area. All right, can kind of audition it, make sure that it's large enough, put things right sides facing, and don't be afraid to double check. So now you see I've lined that raw edge of my A3 fabric right up against the edge that I just trimmed. You could certainly do it that way, or you can give yourself more room to groove and go beyond that line and trim it away later. All right, so I can hold this and kind of bring it forward and make sure I'm going to have enough room for trimming. Also, be sure you have enough room to go beyond your block up to that dotted line that you're going to trim your block to. So now that I have these fabrics matching, right sides facing, I'm going to sew along the A2, A3 join. So again, sink your needle before you put your presser foot down and start sewing. You can see my laser light is going right down that stitching line. That is super helpful when you're doing paper piecing. And I'm going to trim my threads. So now you see I have the third piece all sewn. I'm going to fold this over and double check that everything's looking nicely. And now I'm going to I'm going to trim and press again. So even if you lined this up really, really nicely, you want to make sure you're still at 1/4 inch. So double check that and then trim it up and then give this piece a good press. So you can see how we are building this block. I'm going to start addressing some of the questions coming in before we get too far along. All right, so we're really coming along here. We need to do some trimming along that top edge now because we're going to start building on the opposite side of A1. So this top strip is the last thing we do, and we honestly don't need to trim this until we get to that point. So same thing we're going to do on the opposite side that we just did here. Just keep double checking, bring your pattern over to the front, and continue along. All right, so let's go ahead and address some of these questions that have come in. Carol agrees with me about the 1.5 stitches. That is no fun. It's just too close together. All right. All right. Love Sulky for one-stop shopping and delivery. You betcha. Okay, Carol says, do you use a separate rotary cutter for paper piecing? Or the same as your fabric or batting? So for paper piecing, since I am not slicing through the paper when I'm trimming, I can use my fabric rotary cutter. But if I am like trimming up a pattern, or I use a lot of digital patterns, even for garment sewing, and you have to tape together sometimes 20, 30, even 50 sheets of paper and then cut out your pattern. And especially when it's a garment pattern, I like to use a rotary cutter to cut those out. So I will have a dedicated paper rotary cutter that I labeled with paper. Mine is way over there, or I would show it to you so that I know. Now you can also just switch out the blade. You can have a blade that is dedicated for your paper cutting. So I highly recommend that you swap those out unless you frequently buy rotary blade refills. But you want to make sure when you are cutting through your fabric that it is as sharp as possible, so that you don't get frayed edges, so that you really can conserve enough of your fabric and get a good accurate cut the first time. So if you find that you're cutting out patterns, or even with foundation paper piecing, and you keep missing one little spot, one little area of the fabric just doesn't get sliced, it's probably because one little area of your rotary cutter is nicked or dull, or something's up with it. So replace that rather than struggling and recutting it a million times. You really want to exercise caution with your rotary cutter. And if there's a nicked area, or if it's getting dull, you can end up slicing the side of your finger or something like that, because you are being too aggressive with it to try to make it work. So that's my 2 cents there. Cheryl wants to know, does the Solvey have an adhesive side? So paper Solvey does not have an adhesive side. The adhesive backed stabilizers are the Sulky Sticky Plus, which I will be showing momentarily when we go over the optional machine embroidery process for this project, as well as Sticky Fabra Solvey and the Sulky Stick and Stitch. Pretty much, if it has stick in the title, it has that sticky backing, okay? So paper Solvey is not sticky. It is really just a lightweight paper that dissolves in water. So awesome. I really, really recommend you try it. Not to mention, it is the giveaway today. If you missed the top of the show today, for everyone who's engaging with the post, liking, sharing, commenting, adding your questions, you are automatically eligible to win our gift today, which is a pack of the paper Solvey. So you'll be able to try it. Okay. Let's see. Yes, there is a ruler that's an add a quarter ruler. Some of you have been asking what ruler I'm using. I just don't happen to have that ruler. And I love my little 1x6 ruler. See, I've already lost it because I've been using, here we go. This is why I have 4 of them, because I need one in every area of my sewing room. I am just so used to using this ruler, and it's such a great size for these little blocks and mini piecing projects. So that's the ruler I like to use. All right. Yes. Love the iron. I'm telling you. And yes, they're in stock. I guess there was something up with the website, but you should be able to purchase right now. So again, this is how little it is. If you put it up to my head, see how small it is? It's so great. And again, it comes with this little silicone resting mat, so you can store it heat side down. I love that about an iron, especially if you have a little pressing area next to where your sewing machine is. If your iron is standing up, the chances of you burning yourself when you're going from one place to another is like so great. And knowing me, like I have iron marks all over myself. I might be a little accident prone. So anything that's going to help me with that, I'll take as well. Okay. Are there other guy-specific projects? Good question. So I just published a blog post yesterday, I believe, about some other graduation gifts, and some of them are great for either gender. So there's a personalized laundry bag that's a big cinched up duffel bag that you can add a monogram or a name to, or maybe even you can find a machine embroidery design that is the mascot of the school they're headed to. That would be really cool to add to the gift as well. Little pouches, backpacks. So there's some other ideas there in that post that you'll find that are really unisex. Any person would enjoy them. Okay. Yes, been there, done that. Okay. So I just want to keep up with the questions, so bring them on. And yes, foundation paper piecing, honestly, I didn't ever really want to try it until I discovered the Sulky paper Solvey, because I had done it in the past with a little bit more intricate pattern. I actually have one waiting in the wings. This is from a different designer though, but I'll just show you the pattern piece. So this has a lot more pieces to it, right? It's still a relatively easy foundation paper piecing pattern, but like, look at this tiny number 14. Look at this tiny little, I mean, picking the paper out of that seam would just give me so much stress. So instead, I will leave the paper behind that little spot, and then when the finished item gets laundered, it's gone. And if you're working on something that can't tolerate water and you're just going to use it as a wall hanging, you can leave that paper Solvey intact because it's actually going to add stability over time. If you are hanging that item up on display as a work of art, you can leave that paper intact. It's not going to hurt anyone. It's so lightweight that it's really not going to change the hand of your project if you have it in just a couple of little spots. You know what I'm saying? If that really bothers you, you can try using tweezers to even pick out the paper Solvey in those little areas, and it will come off much easier than a thicker weight paper would. So you'll have less of a chance of popping out your stitches or accidentally tearing them out. So some different options. All right, Linda has used paper Solvey for years. Fantastic. And yes, Cindy, get brave enough to try it with all these, helpful tools. They're really going to make things so much easier for you. Also, I should have mentioned, or maybe I did, I'm using a lightweight thread as well. I'm using the Sulky 50 weight cotton. You can also use the Sulky Poly Light. Poly Light is even lighter weight than the 50 weight cotton. It's a 60 weight thread. So a lot of paper piecers like to use the Poly Light. It just makes everything so nice. And talk about not messing with the hand of your project. You're going to have a really, really nice cuddly quilt when you are done. All right, lots of people talking about the iron. Get you one while you can. And bonus, it comes in cute colors that can match your sewing room. So I love that. Okay. Judy says, I use my 1/4 inch ruler all the time for paper piecing. So good tip. Good tip. Okay. What is the name of the mini iron trivet? All right, so this silicone mat comes with the iron. It comes with it. So there's not a specific name for this. It's just the Oliso little resting trivet that comes with it. One side is to store the iron, so this slips over the top for storing it, and the other side you use to rest on your ironing surface. So really great. Oh, Carolyn says it looks complicated still. So we are going to try to instill some confidence in you, and hopefully you'll want to try it. The pattern is completely free, so head on over to the free project page. I linked to it in the description of today's post, so you can try it out. No harm, no foul. Grab some fabric scraps. They don't even have to match if you're practicing. It's really the most complicated part about paper piecing is to make sure that the fabric pieces you choose for each area are large enough for that area plus your seam allowance. Okay, that's really the hardest part. And if you choose a fabric that's too small, or once you press it open, you realize you're a little bit off and your seam allowance isn't exactly a 1/4 inch, you might be able to still keep going because your seam allowance on the other piece might kind of make up for it. As long as you have a little bit of fabric extending beyond that stitching line, you should be fine, hopefully. So give it a try. All right. Oh, Lori, I'm so sorry. Where were you in your videos the first time I paper pieced? I know, but we're here now. We're learning together, and You know, we're changing lives today. Okay. So once you get the top portion of this block done, let me see if I can get back to where I need to be to show you. Here is me just folding over that piece along that seam line to make sure I have enough seam allowance for the piece that I am sewing on. Then you can see how transparent this paper is. That's how lightweight it is. I can see my fabric print underneath. So if you really want to get persnickety and make sure that your directional print, first off, is facing the right direction, secondly, is not askew, right? It's perfectly in line with your piece. You can do a little bit of sort of fussy cutting simply by looking through your paper that you're sewing. So that is also another bonus for using the paper Solvey. All right, and here I'm just folding along that seam line so that I can first off audition my next piece and then trim it away. All right, and here using that ruler that I like to use, if you have a specialty 1/4" ruler, by all means use that, but I just love using this ruler for my paper piecing projects. All right, so here is a picture of that piece entirely paper pieced, the one I was just working on and showing you. If you missed the beginning, once our live feed ends, you can continue on Facebook and watch the whole thing from the start. Once you have the top, there it is all done. It needs a good press. After you press it and you complete the bottom portion of the block, so here is the top. Here is the bottom that I haven't cut out quite yet. Once you do those 2 units, you will sew them together along that seam line that's along the top of your pattern. Once you sew that together, trim up all of your thread tails, and then you can trim your block pieces along that outer dotted line. That ensures you have ample seam allowance to add borders, to add cornerstones, to do whatever kind of quilting you want to do. You could make these into individual blocks and make a little hanging banner for Father's Day or for a graduation party. Something like that would be really cute. You don't even need to put these into a quilt. They are cute on their own. All right, you would of course want to add some kind of backing to them to cover up, your seams as well as any remaining paper Solvey that you have. All right, so here we are just trimming up that block. And I added these cute little border pieces to just kind of coordinate. So I did borders along the sides, and then I did longer borders on the upper, middle, and lower edge seams of the blocks. And that's just how I put together this little mini quilt. You, of course, can do whatever you like and create your own design using this free pattern. All right, I also created a little hanging sleeve along the back. A lot of the times I forget to do this. And if you forget to do it as well, you can create a little sleeve simply by creating a tube of fabric. Make sure to fold in your short edges so you have a finished edge opening. So fold in the short ends, sew that little hem allowance, if you will. Then fold your strip of fabric right sides facing, stitch that long edge, and then turn it right side out. I like to use a knitting needle or a chopstick, something that's rather blunt on the edge or on the end so that you don't poke through and create a hole in your fabric. So once you create your hanging sleeve, you can press it from, the right side, and you can actually just hand sew it to the back of your quilt. My hanging sleeve is tiny, but it's big enough that I can put a little dowel in there, or I can hang it with a string or with a fabric tube that I've created. So it's just big enough for what I wanted. You could make your hanging sleeve a little bit larger if you want. If you have a larger dowel or something that you're going to hang it from, But a lot of the times I forget that little detail. So I wanted to make sure to mention it to all of you. Okay, let's see, where was I? Okay, so here you can see this is the upper edge of my finished quilt. And this is where I thought to myself, I have got to add machine embroidery. If this is just standing alone, it's, you know, it's still a pretty quilt that features some ties and might be good for that memory quilt that I was talking about at the top of today's show. But I thought it really needed a message or something like that to really personalize the gift, or to say, hey, this is for a great dad who lives in this house, or this is for a grad headed off to business school, something like that. So if you are going to add, oh, here it is hanging again. If you're going to add machine embroidery, it is a good idea to do so before you have quilted your quilt together. So once the top is complete, take the top, find the center by folding it in half, and then we're going to center it onto Sulky Sticky Solvey. So, Sulky Sticky Plus. Sticky Plus is kind of my go-to stabilizer if I'm embroidering something that is pretty much already completed or on its way. So you could see this has already been cut. I already have my top fabric strip to the size that I need it. If I had embroidered that piece prior to putting it on the quilt top, then I could embroider a larger piece and perhaps hoop the entire thing and use Sulky Tear Easy Stabilizer. But since I had already completed my quilt top, I centered that area that I was going to embroider and stuck it to the Sticky Plus stabilizer, which was in the hoop. So I've done this demo many times for using Sticky Plus. You hoop the stabilizer with the paper side facing up, and then using this great little Sticky Plus slitting pen, which has a really sharp tip to it. It's a sharp tip, but it's not sharp enough to go through the stabilizer. It only goes through that paper backing. So super awesome tool. My life was changed when I found this tool. So you'll score the paper backing once you've hooped the stabilizer, and then peel it away to reveal the sticky surface. Then stick your quilt top to it, centering your design area. You can double check that your design is centered by doing a perimeter based function if you happen to have that on your machine, or you can use the design template and make sure that once you move, you can advance your needle throughout the design to kind of make sure that it's going to sew in the right area. So using your template, all kinds of things. There's tons of different placement tools out there, but I also find that using the built-in functions on your machine itself, you can get really close, if not absolutely perfect, with your placement. All right, so once that is in the hoop, you will simply just start embroidering your design. So I wanted to show you this shot because before I settled on this font, I combined some built-in letters on the machine, and I used a gray thread that kind of matched this light gray of my quilt border. But you can see that it's not very effective now. You can hardly even read this. Now, looking at it up close, because we're always looking at our project up close when we're sewing it, it looked great. But once I did the final, I mean, you can hardly even read this, especially if you're using it as a wall hanging, something far away. So I decided to do something with a little bit more contrast. I went with all black thread. I used Sulky Poly Deco 40 weight thread for the embroidery, and I kept my poly light in the bobbin. So I decided to go with something with much more contrast and a larger, blockier font. So you might want to do some test stitches to make sure that, especially when you're doing lettering or monograms, to make sure you can actually read it, okay? So that's why I wanted to show you that image there. So here we are embroidering the darker thread onto that lighter gray fabric. And there you see, I just appliqued that strip on. So you can either embroider that gray border strip before you add it to the rest of your quilt top. And that way you're totally sure that your design is going to be centered where you want it. Or you can embroider it once your quilt top is complete and stick your quilt top to the stabilizer and then embroider that area. Or, since mine was an afterthought, you could embroider this on a completely separate piece of fabric and then applique a little rectangle that is the perfect size for that border. And again, then you could swap out your message if you wanted to, simply by removing your applique stitches and putting another message on top. So different ideas for embellishing the same sort of quilt top. And again, change this up for the size that you want. Maybe you want a larger quilt gift. Maybe you want to create just one tie with a little message, thanks dad, love you dad, off to college, something like that. Create a card out of it. Create a little hanging bunting for a party. Something like that would be really cute. And again, I love, love, love the memory quilt idea. So if any of you make that, please send me a picture at info@sulky.com because I would love to see actual ties used for the tie portion of this block, because I think that would be a great way to honor somebody who has passed on, or if you've just inherited a bunch of ties and you want to showcase them, this is the perfect project to do so. All right, so one more great gift idea for a graduate as well is something else new at Sulky.com. I know I'm always talking about sewing themed jewelry. I'm obsessed. I'm sorry, I'm obsessed. This would make a great little gift if you have a sewist that you need a present for. It would even make a great gift for a hairdresser, right? It's a little ring. Well, it's a big ring in the shape of these cute scissors. Isn't that awesome? It has tons of bling on it. So cute. And what I also love about it is the band for this ring is like stretchy elastic. So if you're anything like me, your hands will start swelling with this hotter weather that we're about to have. And I just love that you can wear this ring on any finger you like, and it's sized for anyone. So really cute. Love it. We have some other varieties too. If the super blingy one isn't your style, how cute. Love it. So you can now get these at sulky.com. Add that to your purchase when you're grabbing up our great sale items today. Here's another one in like an antique silver finish. Same ring as this other one. This is the antique gold and a little bit antique silver. So cute. You can grab up your iron. You can wear your little blingy scissor ring and get your paper piecing on, right? So another great gift idea, maybe for yourself. Why not treat yourself? Okay. All right. Just want to make sure nobody has any more specific questions about foundation paper piecing using Sulky Paper Solvey. If I have not addressed your question today, please feel free to email us at any time at info@sulky.com because we are always here to help you out. Okay. Oh, good point. Denise says, I need to get better at labeling. I'm going to start embroidering my labels for quilts when I make them. So along with that hanging sleeve, a little label is a great touch, especially for a gift quilt. Even if it's not a gift quilt and you're making it for yourself, add a little label, maybe of the date you made it. Maybe you want to title the piece, put your name on it. I mean, these are works of art. You have to sign your stuff, right? All right. Oh, someone's looking for the cutting tool. If you're looking for this slitting pen, it's called the Sticky Plus Slitting Pen. You could just search slitting pen and this little beauty will come up. Love it. It's like one of my favorite things. Okay. And it's really hard to say 3 times fast or even just once. Bling Rings. Yes. Okay. And again, yes, cute ring for those of us who love to sew, but also maybe you're finally being able to get back into the salon, get your nails done, get your hair done. It's a great little gift for your stylist who maybe you haven't seen in a while. So really good idea for that as well. All right. Is there a concern that the printer ink will bleed when you're using the paper Solvey? So we always recommend to print either on the sticky, the stick and stitch, the sticky fabric Solvey, or the paper Solvey. When you're using your printer to print on those products, you don't need to saturate them with ink. So go into your printer settings and set it to draft, or set it to, if you don't have a draft setting, set it to the lowest ink setting, and you will be able to see your fine lines of the pattern just fine. You really don't need to saturate them with ink. Now, if you forget to do that and you grab the paper and it looks maybe like a little bit wet from the ink, just let it set for a while. Let it set before you start placing fabrics on it. And it will just dry and be fine. In most cases, in my experience, okay? But really recommend that you put it on the draft setting so that you don't have any ink that hasn't absorbed that then gets transferred onto something else. I have not had that happen personally, but we all have different printers and you know, it's going to react differently. It's like having a different brand of sewing machine. You know, there's going to be little nuances that we're going to have to adjust for. So keep that in mind. All right, Mary bought the slitting pen and it works great. I know, it's like once you have that, you'll never go back to trying to use a pin again to score the paper backing of your stabilizer, because probably 50% of the time you're going to slice through the stabilizer as well as the paper backing, and then you have to either waste that or save it for a smaller hoop project or try to patch it together. It's just not ideal. So that slitting tool is key. All right, I think I'm caught up on questions. Again, if I missed something, feel free to email us at info@sulky.com. We'll get your question answered ASAP. All right, so next week on So What, I'm going to be debuting the project that we will be creating for our brand new Sulky Summer Sewing Session. This is a new offering at sewingonline.sulky.com. We will be working our way through this great project, which was designed specifically for Sulky by Sally Tomato. We love Sally Tomato. The instructions for these patterns are so great. And when you sign up for this sewing session, you get the pattern for free. You get tons of video instruction. You get ancillary posts that include technique instructions. There may be additional videos. There is so much information packed into this virtual education opportunity. It is really state of the art. I think you all are going to love it so much. So if you've tried our video casts, webcasts, webinars in the past, this is kicked up several notches. So please give it a try if you want to learn how to make this project. It's kind of like this, I just realized it's kind of like this little quilting pouch, but you're making it yourself. It opens fully. There are 2 sizes. You can use one for a wallet, one for a project carrier. We're going to be adding this beautiful embroidery to it, which is completely optional, but the designs come with the kit. And when you register, you will get a coupon code to use to get the kit at an insanely good price. So there are lots of perks to joining this virtual offering. So head on over to sewingonline.sulky.com and sign up for the sewing session. I will be talking about it more in depth next week, but the session goes live on May 31st. So you will not get your pattern files or any videos or anything until the 31st. However, if you sign up early, if you're an early bird and you sign up before the session goes live, you will save $5 off of the session as well. All right, so be sure to head on over and register. Use coupon code DEANIE5. It's not Deanie S, it's DEANIE5 to save $5 off of the session. That coupon code is only going to be valid until the session goes live on the 31st. So you can go ahead and register for that. Get kind of amped up and prepped for it. You can order your kit now. It can be available when the session goes live, and then you can work your way throughout the session at your own pace. So again, that's what we're going to be talking about next week. So be sure to join me for another So What next Tuesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. And until then, I hope that you all have fun with this project and all of the great new things you can grab up at sulky.com. And I will see you next time, everyone. Have a wonderful day.